Hello, welcome back everyone to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I am Jesse Collings. I am joined as always with my co-host Jason Ounpraseuth. Jason, how are you doing today? We have had a lot happen over the last 2 weeks. I was thinking about our last episode and I was like, we talked to Adam in our last episode and we were gonna go to Death Before Dishonor on Saturday, the day after. Um, and I was like, oh, that had to be more than 2 weeks ago. But then I was like, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. We haven't had an episode since. So it just feels like so much has happened in the wrestling world. Um, in like the real news world, Jason, like July and August is viewed as like this very down period for news. There's nothing ever happens. You kind of got to be creative with your story ideas. It's a good time to maybe do like a side kind of project or a long-term story you've been working on. But in the wrestling world, holy smokes, the last 2 months have been just an incredible whirlwind of different events.
Yeah, on the day after we recorded the podcast of Adam was the Vince McMahon news came out right away, which kind of put our episode into interesting context when we talked about what's the company gonna look like with Triple H? Well, we'll probably won't know for a while, and then it just happened straight ahead after that episode came out.
Yeah, literally, like I would say, like 20 minutes after the episode was uploaded, that the news broke that Vince was the tweet came out that said Vince was retiring and all of that. Yeah. It was funny because how I found out about it was, so I we recorded it and then I uploaded the episode and then I was focused on my real job, and I got a message from Adam and he just said like, oh my God, we had terrible timing. And I was like, terrible timing for what? And then so I immediately, I knew he's figured to talk about some big news. And then so I immediately like went to Twitter and I was like, oh my God, Vince is stepping down. And so much of that episode, and if people want to go back and listen to it, it was the episode, during the episode, we talked about talent development and kind of how WWE has handled NXT and the success of the Performance Center and a lot of those kind of aspects. And WWE, we talked a lot about what it would be like if Vince McMahon wasn't in charge and kind of talked about it as a purely hypothetical sense. And then obviously a few minutes after we publish it, suddenly Vince McMahon's not in charge. So I like to think of it like we were ahead of the game, Jason, that we were advanced, we knew something, and that here we're talking about what's going to happen with when Vince isn't in charge. But yeah, that was something.
Yeah, it's that feeling like I work in the sports media landscape, and the MLB trade deadline just passed, and it's kind of like you write a column a week ago saying, oh, Eric Hosmer is going to go to the Red Sox, and then it happens, and then you just feel that much smarter. I didn't do that, but that was definitely a surprise there. But it had that similar feeling there, and of course, unexpectedly, you just talked to Brandon Ross from Lightshed, and he's the one that broke the news of like, oh, not only Vince McMahon is gone from creative as well, not just from his sort of like as like a more business side of things. As head of WWE, the chairman and CEO, he's just gone completely. Presumably at least we haven't really heard much since then that whether he's operating in the background or not, but at least in the foreground, Vince McMahon is gone from WWE.
Right. And my thought process was I saw the tweet from Vince and I saw kind of the announcement from WWE saying he's stepping down. And at first I was like, oh my God, this is huge, huge news. And then because I'm an internal pessimist when it comes to WWE, I thought, well, this doesn't say he's stepping down from creative. It says he's stepping down from being CEO and chairman of the board, which he had already temporarily stepped down from due to the investigation. And so I started thinking, well, okay, this is just him kind of formalizing something that he had already kind of done. And then so I was like, oh, maybe this isn't actually that big of a news. And then I saw the Brandon Ross tweet that said Vince is no longer in charge of creative. And that was when it was like, okay, this is real. This is as big as it gets, really, when it comes to a news story in wrestling. And so that brings us to kind of our topic today, which is talking about, since we've had kind of 2 weeks to digest this process of Vince McMahon no longer being in charge of WWE and certainly not being in charge of their creative direction, to kind of give our, I guess, our thoughts and our opinions on so far what we have seen from the product, a product that's being led by Triple H, Paul Levesque, and what our early impressions are from the shows that we have seen. I think the SmackDown show that took place a few hours after Vince McMahon was made official, it was kind of implied that that was still basically a show that Vince had written, that Vince had produced. So we weren't really going to learn anything new from that. There was Raw the following week. Again, it felt similar to like a Vince show. And then we kind of get to another SmackDown, and then we got to SummerSlam, which is I think what we'll talk about today. And then obviously the Raw the following night, which was attempted to make kind of a public statement about this is what a Triple H led WWE creative product is like now. And so I guess I'll start, Jason, asking you, what are your just honest impressions of the Triple H led era of WWE based on the limited amount of content we've seen him provide over?
Yeah, just based on the small sample size that we had so far, it's been underwhelming to me. At least, obviously, I think the SummerSlam, particularly the debuts of, I guess the reintroductions of Bailey, Io Shirai, or Io Sky as she's known now, and Dakota Kai, who the latter two were kind of away from WWE for like the past few 4 months. Yeah, I think the last Dakota Kai was released in April, and Io Shirai, her last show was in NXT in April as well, and so we're kind of wondering like are they going to go to AEW? Obviously, Stardom fans after they announced the IWGP Women's title were kind of thinking, oh, maybe that's a title for Io Shirai to have. That's obviously not the case anymore. But I think I think that and their focus on them and the Raw episode were really imprints of what Triple H wanted to at least show, at least, and it kind of mirrors what we've heard behind the scenes as well from reporting from Sean Ross Sapp and just sort of, I guess, general vibes from other talent as well, saying that there is a more happier vibe in WWE, and I guess you could kind of see that with a little pep in the step with some of the talent, but I think for the most part, in the creative direction, it's kind of just been more of the status quo that we've seen, but just a slight alteration. Like wrestlers are actually watching television from a normal perspective, not just the slanted angle there, and there hasn't really been much, I guess, dramatic change as many would have hoped with a Paul Levesque led WWE. I don't know what your impressions were, Jesse.
Yeah, I think the first Raw, so the Raw from 2 weeks ago, I guess now, I thought was kind of really underwhelming because it was hyped up as this big thing where, it was Madison Square Garden, it was Raw, Triple H, a new era begins. And then they really just had a very typical WWE Raw show. They didn't do anything special or interesting on it. And I thought that was a mistake. I think you wanted to send a message to people who are sampling the product again that things are different. I thought SummerSlam was very similar in the sense that I did not get the impression that that was like a hugely different Triple H show. The one thing you mentioned, the reintroductions of, Io Shirai and Bailey and Dakota Kai, that was clearly done at the end of especially because Io Shirai and Dakota Kai are NXT people, which are de facto viewed as Triple H people within the company and to the public. So they come out at the end of the first match, and that was kind of like okay, everybody, Triple H is in charge moment. But it also was really dumb. Like they just came out and stared at Bianca, and then Becky joined in, and then they just stared at them, and then they walked away, and it felt like 10 seconds of thought was actually put into what they were going to do. And so I was like, well, that was, I guess, cool that they debuted them, but at the same time, they did absolutely nothing. And it's kind of clear they just made that up with like not a lot of creative thought put into it. With that being said, I think on Raw, you did see a lot of little things that you maybe wouldn't have seen under Vince's watch, like you said, Jason, the angle of their TV viewing, like the people backstage watching television at a normal angle instead of some sort of ridiculous angle involving looking at the camera and looking at the TV, but they're in two different spots. But that stuff, I think that like really like hardcore fans are going to pick up on. I think the stuff that like maybe you're trying, because Raw did a really big rating, which is a big part of this. And I think a lot of that was people who were curious about what the Triple H product would be like, but had stopped watching the regular Vince McMahon product. And I think that they did do some stuff to try to get those people back on board. They produced a wrestling heavy kind of show. They had a lot of wrestling on the show and wrestling matches. They gave a lot of time to women and women's matches, which is something that WWE really doesn't get criticized a lot for, which is that the amount of time dedicated towards women's matches is very low, especially relative to how many women they have on the roster and how many, star level performers they have in that division. And the fact that most of the time are reduced to wrestling under 5-minute matches is very strange. But you saw a lot more dedication towards them. A thing that stood out to me was kind of the video package for the United States Championship, which kind of came out of nowhere, but did kind of show, I think, something that a Triple H kind of product wants to show to people who maybe have tuned out the product, which is, hey, remember our mid-card championships that Vince just never cared about ever? We're going to try to buff those up and make you care about them again and actually care about, here's the United States Championship. This is why it's important. This is why it matters who defends this championship. And that's, I think, a really easy win for WWE to sell to people, because I think all fans, especially older fans or lapsed fans, want to care about the United States Championship. They want to care about the Intercontinental Championship. They haven't had a reason to do that for years and years. And that's something that I think you can convince people pretty easily to get back on board if you do present it as it's being important. And I think that's something that may be a pet project of Triple H that we're seeing come forward.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing with what we've seen under Triple H, as all these very small things, but very easy wins for Triple H. Just very minor things that obviously, like, I think the effect will be most felt on people who've watched WWE for at least 5 or so years or so. I don't think for someone watching for the first time is really going to pick up on these sort of things, but I guess these are these little things that you are implementing onto these people who you hope are watching next week. You hope that Raw does either a better number next week. I have no idea if whether people would stick around after watching Raw. And I think for SummerSlam as well, I don't know how many people are actually what translates into people liked SummerSlam and they wanted to watch Raw. I have no idea what that correlation is, but definitely all these small wins are very easy ones, because Vince McMahon is he never looked at these details. He just wanted these big picture moments, or just these moments to pop a rating every once in a while, and he never really paid close attention to these things that, like the United States title or the Intercontinental title, which presumably we will get another package tonight on Friday. I would assume something similar to that.
Yeah.
With Walter as the champion now.
I
But
think you mean Gunther.
oh yes, Gunter. Yes, of course, my mistake. But yeah, I think all these small things are little wins that for Triple H to get right away, and it's very easy for him to do because it's just a very minor thing that doesn't really affect the grand picture of the show.
Yeah, you said easy wins, right? Look, the bar was really low for what would be considered a better product than what WWE was producing. So doing very minor things can help go a long way. And there's a huge audience of people that are going through things with a fine-tooth comb, looking for very minor changes. I know people were all over the commentary on SummerSlam. Oh, the commentary is so different. It's so much better. Michael Cole said that, he said WWE fans instead of WWE Universe one time. And he mentioned Jesse Ventura and he mentioned Bruno Sammartino. I mean, I didn't think the commentary was any better than it was before. I thought it was, actually it was better because Pat wasn't on the show because he was wrestling on it. But functionally, I didn't think the commentary stylistically was any better than it ended up than it previously was. But you have people looking for stuff like that. Oh, were there less camera cuts in that segment? These things that people didn't like about the product now kind of closely being put under the microscope and being viewed and compared to what they were under Vince and seeing if there's any difference. But you're right. It's hardcore fans. If you're a fan that hasn't watched in 3 or 4 years, you're probably not really going to know the difference. I think with SummerSlam, the reaction to SummerSlam was really positive. It seemed like felt like every headline I saw for every review was something like Vince or Triple H hits home run with SummerSlam, or SummerSlam, a refreshing new start for WWE. I thought it was very similar to a Vince McMahon produced pay-per-view. There were, non-finishes. There were, the wrong people going over, the wrong type of teases being turned, like Montez Ford being turned heel for no reason. All these kind of unforced errors in the booking, the whole women coming out and having no actual plan for them other than just the pop for them coming out. Even the Roman Reigns Brock Lesnar spectacle, how is that not the same old shit? It's Roman Reigns and the Usos, beat up Brock Lesnar and Brock Lesnar loses, and they raised a ring up on a forklift, and that was enough to convince people that they were seeing something new and exciting. And I thought if Vince McMahon produced that show, a lot of people would be like, oh, the show was bad, or this is, all the same problems with WWE. But those optics totally switched with Triple H in charge. With Triple H in charge, people are so much more optimistic. That well-worn pessimism that they had from years and years of consuming a declining WWE product under Vince McMahon is totally shifted now. And all of a sudden, people are way more positive about this company. People are way more optimistic about the future. And really important people like Dave Meltzer, people like Sean Ross Sapp, these people that hold a lot of value in the wrestling, intelligence community, are much more positive about this company in the future of it than they were when Vince was in charge. I have to see a lot of evidence for me to feel that way. But there, like you said, there's some easy wins that Triple H can hit to make you feel like there is a change happening, even if the big picture kind of feels the same.
Yeah, you definitely. I believe in the Observer that went out today. I think Dave Meltzer had like a nod to where, like, in the backstage environment, words like wrestler or wrestling aren't seen as like these taboo sort of words. And again, those are just very small things of like, like
you
there's
can
nothing
say
wrong with
you
that.
work for a wrestling company and you can say wrestling and wrestler
Exactly.
backstage.
And I think Becky Lynch was interviewed for an ESPN feature where she called it like a brand new era for WWE. And so, like, definitely there are a lot of these optimistic and very positive vibes coming out for WWE, but it kind of just goes up at the top in terms of the roster, where Roman Reigns is still champion. And I don't really see that direction changing anytime soon. Like, I don't really envision Drew McIntyre beating Roman Reigns, even if the pay-per-view event is at the UK. It's in Wales, not really in Scotland, but still, like, it's in the UK for McIntyre, but still, I don't really see him coming up on top, and still, I don't really see a direction for anyone beating Roman Reigns anytime soon. And it just kind of goes back to the Vince booking, where Roman is the top guy. Even if Johnny Gargano does come out, who people view as Triple H's guy, I don't know if Johnny Gargano is going to get that mega push to actually beat Roman Reigns, and whether that's believable or not in a very short amount of time. But still, like, all the big picture Vince stuff is still around, and I don't really see that changing anytime soon. But I think for now, all the little stuff is what Triple H can do to build up positivity, and you're seeing that as well in the business aspect of things for WWE, where the stock price hasn't really tanked as much as some people would have predicted. We're like, oh, if Vince McMahon ever left WWE, that would be the end for WWE business wise, but that hasn't really happened just yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's written into the WWE stock analysis that the company produces, that if something were to happen to Vince McMahon, like he were to die, or in this case resign in shame, that you can expect the stock to decline. Now, the stock is up, I think, in part because people saw this as a precursor for a sale. That seems to be the general consensus, is that now it looks like WWE is more likely to be sold now that Vince is no longer in charge, and therefore the stock price has gone up. But obviously, I think things like the ratings going up for Raw and SmackDown over the last couple of weeks is a positive sign, showing that the company's just not going to totally tank without Vince. And I don't think any of us really thought that was going to be the case. Um, so yeah, obviously we talk about the big picture. We don't see what's going to change the big picture. I think you can easily argue, well, obviously Triple H has only been in charge for like 2 weeks. They're not just going to scrap everything. We're going to see gradual change starting at a very small level and then hopefully sweep up to bigger change. I would kind of argue that maybe you could just do a big sweeping change and you could do something really radical, because that would send a message, that would send a real message to people that, okay, things are totally different now. They're not the way they used to be, as opposed to doing small little gradual changes that most people aren't going to notice. I think if you were just be like, you know what, Roman's losing the title to somebody, somebody new, that would send a really big message that the company is totally different. And I think that would be more convincing to people like me who remain skeptical of Triple H in charge. But yeah, I would say from a planning perspective, the biggest question I think Triple H is going to have to answer is, what new young wrestlers are you going to push hard? And who is left on that WWE roster and who is left in NXT that you feel comfortable doing that? Because a lot of those people are no longer in the company. They've been released, and a lot of them have signed with AEW. A lot of the people maybe Triple H would wanted to groom for that future WrestleMania main event role, got purged from the company, really. And so you don't have Adam Cole, and you don't have someone like Malachi Black, you don't have Kyle O'Reilly, you don't have a lot of these people that he was really high on and pushed a ton in NXT. And so what are you left with as far as young talent who feel like they have that potential? You mentioned Gargano, the biggest winner of all this is Johnny Gargano, because he was just sitting there biding his time. I guess a lot of people probably assumed he'd eventually make his way to AEW, but he hadn't signed, and now the landscape has changed, and he could really reap the benefits of being kind of a new guy that pops up in WWE and gets over. But you look at that roster, is who on that roster stands out to you? Or even if you go down to NXT, who stands out to you as somebody that they could push as a really big star that hasn't already kind of been slotted into a undercard slot? Because I really don't think there's a lot of available people that they could really elevate to a new level that hasn't, already been established at a certain position on WWE hierarchy.
Yeah, it's really tough to say. Like the NXT people who like aren't like who were part of the old regime of the black and gold. Like you had Roderick Strong, but still, like he's already slotted as the veteran of the roster with his faction Diamond Mine, who they themselves are still, I think they have interesting potential, but they're still pretty green. Like, and obviously that's why they have Roderick Strong with them.
Yeah, and Roddy, I love Roderick Strong probably more than like 99% of wrestling fans, but he's not a WrestleMania main event level.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not really up to that. And Triple H saw that as well where he was positioned for Undisputed Era. He was in the Bobby Fish level of the stars there. Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly were the big stars for that group. And so other than that, it's like they seem to be at least Vince McMahon was really high on Theory. I have no idea where Triple H is on Theory. He's still kind of just booking him the same way Vince was, as a joke, as a geek. And so it seems like, he's kind of, Triple H is kind of keeping the same status quo for Theory for now, but still, like, that's the only star they're really pushing in terms of someone who's like really young. Other than that, it's like everyone else, like Ricochet, he's kind of stuck in the mid card.
He's dead.
Yeah, I don't really see any way of him being pushed to really bring back his credibility. And like, yeah, other than that, like all those other guys are kind of in that same level where they are pretty much dead on arrival if they are ever pushed on the main event scene.
Yeah, I'd say like, I think Montez Ford would be the person that I would point to on the main roster who hasn't been necessarily killed. And when under Vince, I always thought that Montez was dead because he's been in a tag team for years. Vince doesn't really like tag teams. So Vince sees him at a certain level and he's never going to really be elevated beyond that. With Triple H in charge, I think there's reason to believe that he could potentially be, I think, a babyface star for the company. I think he has all the tools, and I don't think he's been booked into oblivion to the degree, although they're coming close with the way that Usos Street Profits match shook out at SummerSlam, but I don't think he's been totally killed with the booking where I feel like you could elevate him to a pretty quickly to a higher level and people would buy it. I don't think he should be a heel. I think that'd be really dumb, and that'd be something that Vince would do, which would be like, yeah, he's gonna turn and he's gonna be a heel, and it's like, well, you need a babyface who has some organic momentum, and he's like probably the only guy on the roster right now who I feel like I'd have confidence you could push as a singles babyface star, and he'd feel fresh and new and exciting, and people would get into that. Riddle, I guess you could say, although he's not really young. But outside of Theory, Theory's just a jag. Like he does nothing for me. I don't think he's particularly charismatic. I don't think he's like an amazing worker. I think he's just kind of a guy. I thought the way he was booked at SummerSlam was really weird in the sense if you were trying to push him at all, so what is Theory's best asset as a performer is that he has a pretty good body. But they put him in the ring with Bobby Lashley, who's like dwarfs him and makes, he's the guy who's built like a Greek god. So he already looks like lesser of a star. You have Lashley squash him, okay, also bad. And then he comes out and he's got the Money in the Bank briefcase and he's gonna cash in. And then he just gets like beaten up like in a second with the briefcase. And then he's lying unconscious outside for 10 minutes while the real stars, Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, are like trying to murder each other and taking every big move and standing up. And he just looked totally inconsequential to WWE. So to me, he's a no-go. Braun Breaker is being positioned as the guy in NXT, but he's not ready. He's too green, and I don't know if he'll ever, there's no guarantee he'll ever develop into the kind of performer that they want to have at that top position. I think just in WWE alone, I just think that there's a lot. The cupboard is pretty bare when it comes to young assets, and that's going to be a challenge because Triple H, if he wants to put his stamp on the company, is a lot of that stamp is going to come with pushing new people and kind of presenting his guys. And I don't know how many of those guys are around that can kind of be sold as new leading figures in the company.
Yeah, the only case is really, excuse me, just with the women's division and, just pushing new stars there. And that's really all they have because, obviously, like the division has mostly been highlighted by the Four Horsewomen and Ronda Rousey. And so obviously you're inherently going to have new names, whoever you're going to push in the women's division. But yeah, for the men's division, like there really isn't anyone there. I was looking at other names at NXT, like, but they're all pretty like on the older side, like Santos Escobar, he's 38. Even Big E, he's kind of a bit, even when he does come back, like he's still on the older side as well. They don't really have a young star that they can push, someone who's like very similar age to Theory, but as we just mentioned, like your Theory is not the guy to push. But other than that,
we're forgetting about Dominic, Jason.
Of course, Dominic or Axiom, the young formerly A Kid,
right.
these stars that everyone remembers. He's got to be younger. He looks like 25 or something.
He looks like A Kid, but I don't know how old he is. He could tell me. He's 25. Okay, yeah, so he's young. He's too small though. That's a bit. I mean, maybe Triple H doesn't care about that, but
yeah.
Some of the other people in charge might. But yeah, I mean, like I said, the women's division I think is in good shape, to be honest. Like especially bring back Dakota in Io Shirai. Dakota was out of the company; she had been released. Io Shirai looked like she was gonna be released, and her contract wasn't gonna be renewed. So bringing those people back in the fold helps a lot. Sasha Banks and Naomi, who knows what's gonna happen with them? If they come back, that would obviously help the division a lot. You did lose Becky for what looks like a while. So that's a tough break, but you did get Bayley back. And in some ways that helps because Bayley feels fresh coming back because she has been on TV in probably about a year now. So that helps. I think Charlotte is probably going to be coming back. I know that might be mixed reviews, but she's at least someone with a ton of credibility as a challenger, someone you can use a lot. So I think the women's division is actually in good shape. They have made somewhat of an earnest effort to do something with Liv Morgan. They gave her the title, which is not nothing. I think she hasn't really been protected at all, but they are trying to turn her into a star. I think that they've done a really good job with Bianca just across 2022. She's by far the best booked person, I think, in WWE, just from start to finish, from her winning the Rumble and her winning at WrestleMania, and then winning decisively at SummerSlam. She feels like she's really been taken up a level thanks to the efforts this time around from the creative department. But yeah, I think Triple H's vision is going to come down to who are the new guys he's going to push, and a lot of those guys are in NXT. I mean, a lot of those guys are in AEW. Ciampa is a guy who, if you look at Raw, I think it was clearly an attempt to present Ciampa as being not necessarily associated with the Miz and being kind of like a serious singles wrestler, which makes sense given how much Triple H liked him and how much Vince apparently didn't. But Ciampa's also not a young guy. He's also got kind of a lot of neck issues. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that you can push for 10 years and kind of be a future stakeholder in your company. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. And you know, something really interesting, Jason, was we heard there was a lot of discussion when Triple H was announced as kind of being Vince's successor about how the policies that WWE had over the last year, which was, we're going to not look at independent wrestling talent. We're going to develop all of our talent in-house. And that's how we're not going to compete with AEW for these talents. There's a lot of discussion about, well, now Triple H is in charge. Triple H will be back out in the market. AEW won't have that market to itself. WWE will change its philosophy and they will, you know, be going after independent talent. And that makes sense because, after all, Triple H was very aggressive in signing independent talent when he was in charge of NXT. So one would think that that philosophy would continue now that he's in charge of the big company. With that being said,